So Rob, I invite you to take the stage with the panel to take us through this session so that we can still be on time and then we can release people on time.
Right. I think in the spirit of getting going, I know that was a wonderful session. It's always inspiring to listen to Clem Santner. More importantly, I think the wise words and some of the food for thought is nothing short of brilliant. So a big thank you to him over lunch, and I know there's a couple of stragglers out there having dessert. I'm sure they'll come in and join us as we go along. The big thing that we're going to address over the next 45 minutes, and we will do it quite quickly, is to me arguably a little bit of a silver bullet when it comes to tourism in South Africa, and that's business travel. And in particular, in this session, we're going to be covering meetings, conventions, exhibitions, and incentive travel. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the stage the panel. It is a super panel that we've been able to assemble for today. Firstly, we've got Sian Stein, who's the exhibition director from Tebi Reed Exhibitions. We've then got Yogi Padmanathan, who's the COO from Piermont Hotels. We're blessed to have Dr. Mati Nayazima, who was an ex-colleague of mine, the executive director at Sandton Convention Center. And I must say, and I must point this out, she is from a convention or conference center that is privately owned. There is a distinction, and then last but not least, we've got the world-famous Dirk Elzinga. He's the MD of the Convention Industry Consultants Pty Limited, but a lot of you would probably know him for his role that he played in launching the Cape Town ICC. Now again, as much as we're blessed to have two of the head honchos from the conference centres, the two probably big ones in South Africa, Sandton and Cape Town, the one I might add and stress again is a privately owned one, and the other one is more of a public nature, so there are distinct differences in that regard. I think just to kick off with, before we get into this little quick overview session that I'm going to lead, you know, 10, 20 years ago, the government and probably most industry players in South Africa regarded tourism as leisure travel. It was always someone arriving with a bucket and spade and coming to the white beaches of South Africa, and really that's what we regarded or what we had focused on as leisure. But the truth is that I think the big one that where the opportunity lies is no doubt in the MICE space, this business travel. And most importantly, and we've heard it from Clem in the lunchtime session now, and I reiterate it again, we're not entitled to success. Just because we were flavour of the month with Madiba coming out of jail and the new democracy of South Africa, no one's entitled to anything. We've heard 7 of the top 10 economies in the world are from Africa now, but even they, just because they're on a rise and a wonderful spiral going upwards, it doesn't make anyone in Africa entitled to suddenly get all this wonderful MICE business. In fact, quite the opposite. I think you are only blessed with getting business when you work damn hard at it and you make sure that you can actually go out there, secure it and source it. But if we're going to achieve some of these numbers which have been spouted forth over the last 2 days and realize the relevance and the importance of tourism, which we hope to do as a country, well, it's going to be a lot of strategic, smart thinking and a lot of hard work. The world is becoming more of a village, and most importantly, I think as it does, there's a lot, people are blessed with choice as well. People now can choose to go anywhere in the world, so once again, there are so many options. It's necessary to work that much harder, because just as we're meeting over the last 3 days here for this HICA conference, I assure you there are a lot of other conferences happening on other continents where they're working out and strategizing how they too can secure a lot of the big business travel into the future. Either way, whatever it is, I think probably inspired by Shakira when she came and graced her presence here in South Africa in 2010 when we hosted the FIFA World Cup here, and she sang Waka Waka, and it's time Africa. And I think in the spirit of what's been discussed in the last couple of days, it's very much a case of saying it's really time for us now, both in South Africa and more importantly, the rest of Africa, to stand up and take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves to us. Quick context. If you have a look at the HICA International Convention rankings, South Africa was ranked 34th globally overall. We were the #1 convention destination in Africa and the Middle East, and very proudly, I suppose, and we have him on stage, Dirk can probably take a bow. Cape Town ICC has been ranked as the #1 in Africa. So these are the catalytic forces which are ultimately going to be, I believe, the pioneers into making sure that we can bring huge amounts of business tourists to South Africa. If you have a look at the competitive analysis, and again, this is just to provide a sense of context. In the first instance, this is just the top 10 countries in the world in terms of their conventions, the number of meetings that they hosted. You'll notice America, as one would expect, 829, right the way down to the Netherlands in 302 in 10th place. None of the African countries appear in there, but that's the current ranking in the world with the research that I undertook. We then had to break it up and say, all right, well, that's the traditional markets, as we could probably refer to it. What about the long-haul markets where people are consciously taking a decision where it's going to be an overnight flight, or if you're coming from America, arguably door-to-door, 27 hours? And suddenly you'll notice we do appear as 12th there, South Africa, with our 118 meetings, where Japan were up at 342. So really, we, as a long-haul market, we start punching above our weight, and we're in the top 12. When you have a look at Africa and where we rank there, well, we top South Africa, Kenya, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Uganda bringing up the rear. But you'll notice there, just putting it into pure context and perspective, this is really the opportunity, and we're not trying to get silly now and start dreaming about 829 conferences or conventions taking place like in the States, but coming off of a very, very low base, I think there's wonderful upside from an African perspective. Briefly touching on MICE, the truth is that it's an acronym, as you full well know. I've mentioned it: meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. They are all very different. We, again, have the advantage of having the panelists on stage who will be able to share. They do concentrate on different areas. JG obviously is very much around gaming, experiential at Piermont, whereas we've got the true conventions and meetings that take place. And then equally with Cian, we've got the exhibition side covered. So we've got a nice I think, spread of panelists who will be able to share their wisdom with us. In a nutshell, though, typically you've got the highest number of visitors who arrive with meetings, for example. They are here for the shortest number of days, typically, but they are usually coming with the company credit card, and more importantly, therefore, your yield and your earnings are that much higher. If you go down to exhibitions, on the other hand, and I think this is where there's a big play for Africa, where I think international organizers are very keen to Africanize and get African titles for business-to-business trade exhibitions that I think opportunistically can take place around the continent. Very briefly, the characteristics of the MICE industry. They're typically long lead times, usually up to 2 years, although I think of late, my experience is that that's shortening somewhat. There's obviously the rotation cycles. No matter how attractive or flavor of the month or season that you are at this point in time, the truth is that it's the opportunity for somebody else. And I think even if you have a look at FIFA soccer, for instance, it's really they try and rotate it and move it around. It's not always necessarily the best bidder. It's to share the love as such, and I think that applies equally in the MICE industry. Business to business is, and this is where the opportunity is, it's one which offers a much higher yield. And the truth is, from my research and my personal experience, the decision is ultimately made on the product side as opposed to the brand and experiential side only. And the weighting, as the experts all seem to concur on, is probably 90% focused on the infrastructure, the capacities, the local knowledge. And these are areas which have been touched on in some of the presentations prior to this one, where we've got to get the skill set and make sure that we're competitive from a capacity point of view, let alone a transport and infrastructural perspective. The key challenges which we face, obviously from a trade show, and by that I'm saying we need more of a presence. We need to uptick that. We need a greater budget. And at the moment, I don't think that's coming through. Meetings Africa, for instance, we need more representatives there, because unless you're able to go and sell it, and business to business is typically reliant on a push, which is a sales-focused paradigm, as opposed to a market, sending out a couple of brochures and pamphlets and emails. People are very much more akin to buy after a strong sales presence as opposed to reading a flyer or pamphlet. So a lack of budget in this regard is a bit of a concern, I believe. A lack of appropriate sales representation if we are going to go out and deliver. Again, I remind you, I don't believe we're entitled to any of this. And then what's critically important, and we'll hear it from the panel now, is the ability to collaborate. And I believe collaboration is the future. That's the way all business should and ought to be done generally. And there's no difference with us working with government, provincial government, the conference venues, the hotels, etc. We've got to work together, because my experience over the last 15, 20 years has been one that it's been quite disjointed, not collaborative in its approach. And dare I say it, my last one there, and this little picture is of a Chinese baby with a birth certificate. I think Clem rounded it up quite nicely. Instead of rolling out red carpets, we put red tape around people. And this visa thing, which as much as it may be going away a little bit or not, I kid you not, when I looked for this picture and I went to images of Chinese birth certificates, there were about 16,000 of them. So this was just one choice of it. And I challenge any human being to be at OR Tambo when they arrive. It could be a Chinese menu. I don't know whether anyone would know what a Chinese birth certificate is, let alone anything else. But these are the challenges, and I know it's an international. We're losing already, have projected to have lost millions of rands worth of business coming forward, and I know there's lots of companies out there who are battling. Imagine organizing a business, a MICE, a meetings, an exhibition conference where people have got to have biometrics and visa requirements such as unabridged birth certificates, etc. It must be an organizer's absolute nightmare. But those are challenges which we're facing. I think we're all aware of them. And what I'm going to do now is basically set the landscape, and then I will pose a couple of questions to the panel, because after all it's their expertise that we're all looking out for. Trade shows, I've said, it's a vital platform if we're going to promote and succeed going forward. I know, thanks to the Conventions Bureau, they've put in a CRM program which will go technologically a long way into assisting and helping now with Simple View, where we can coordinate and correlate and collaborate on all the players and stakeholders in the industry. Obviously, the competitive set, only 6-7 years ago, Egypt would have been flavour of the month. At the moment, they're coming off at a rapid rate for obvious reasons. Political unrest, terrorism, it's Ebola. There's so many reasons, and you've got to move and shake around with that. Obviously, with long lead times, it makes it more difficult. But people are looking for stability and consistency, and that's something which, as much as we've got this growing continent and the economies on the continent, it's going to be critical that we're mindful also of the political and economic shifts. I think Africa as a continent of opportunity, in Nigeria, Ghana, Angola, with their oil and whatever, they're becoming very much more prominent. And then obviously from a subvention point of view, I do know that KZN, it was mentioned, are very proactive in terms of supporting events or activities that take place in their province, and that's not to be critical of any of the other 8 provinces, but unless there's cooperation and a shared funding and sourcing, etc., big question marks over KZN. Ironically now, I want to charge an extra 10% room levy, which will go towards the subventions that they will create in bringing events and activations to the province.